Welcome, everyone. It's great to be here for Pacific Northwest Climate Week. I'm Sarah Keller, and I lead communications for ClimateVoice. I'm excited to be moderating today's session about how employees can advocate for climate at work. ClimateVoice was founded by Bill Weil, a former sustainability leader at Google and Facebook. And Bill recognized that public policy is the transformative lever when it comes to addressing the climate crisis and was frustrated that companies were sitting on the sidelines of major legislative battles. Because he was a corporate insider, he knew that executives responded when employees raised issues and saw firsthand the power of the workforce in the fight for LGBTQ equality. He started ClimateVoice to educate and activate people to raise their voice for climate at work because companies have a lot of influence with lawmakers, which is why we are excited to share real-life examples of that advocacy with our amazing panelists today. I'm going to start off by having our panelists introduce themselves. So, can each of you briefly tell us what you are currently working on and what is your climate superpower? I'll let you go first, Van.
My name's Van Riker. Currently at Microsoft, and I've been working on educating people about why it's important for Microsoft to leave the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and how they're misaligned with Microsoft's sustainability goals. And I think my superpower is more about actually extracting from other people who are motivated and using that energy to propel myself to then help push that energy back out and get other people involved.
Amazing. Ooh, I'm loud. Hi, everyone. I was going to ask if you could hear me, but I'm pretty sure you can. My name is Nivi, and I am the founder of Soapbox Project, and we create joyful spaces for climate action. So, my superpower is community building, and you will never catch us hosting a bad event. That is a promise. And I absolutely love ClimateVoice and everything that's happening here, and I'm so excited to be here. So, thank you.
I'm Holly Alpine, and thanks so much for being here today. I have been fairly offline for the past 6 months. I left Microsoft at the end of January, mostly due to some concerns that we'll mention briefly today. So I have been on a honeymoon for the past 6 months, so just getting back to Seattle. But also love what ClimateVoice does. I'm very passionate about these issues, and I think we are all chosen kind of for similar superpowers around organizing. So we'll go into that more soon.
Hello, hello. I actually want to start by acknowledging that we're on the traditional lands of the Duwamish people, who have no federal representation and thus no resources. And so I'd like to encourage everybody here to check out Real Rent, duwamishrealrent.org, and pay rent to the tribe because this land was stolen from them. My name is Drew Wilkinson. I spent 7 years at Microsoft, and along with Holly, we co-founded the company's first employee sustainability community. But now I run my own consulting business focused on community organizing and employee engagement. And my climate superpower is tied between good old-fashioned community organizing and bringing humor into climate work through climate memes.
Thank you all for those spirited answers. I'm going to start on the side with you, Drew and Holly. Together, you co-founded a thriving employee network at Microsoft called the Sustainability Connected Community, also known as the SCC. Can you describe the model and why it was successful?
Yeah, so back in 2018, it started as just two of us. And then we had a local meetup group once a month, and slowly but surely over time, that grew into hundreds and eventually 10,000 employees at Microsoft trying to figure out the unique ways that they could make sustainability part of their jobs. I think part of what made it successful was that we sought top-down support and executive sponsorship from the company's chief sustainability officer from the very, very beginning. When I talk to employees at other companies who are trying to organize, create, sustainability communities or employee resource groups, oftentimes they're doing it sort of off the side or in the shadows, and that varies a lot by company and culture and all of that. But we were fortunate in that the company's first and former chief sustainability officer, Lucas Joppa, was very supportive of the idea of employees organizing themselves as a constituent group early on. He understood that if employees could speak with a fairly unified voice, that he could actually use that when he went and talked to the CEO and to various members of the C-suite and say, look, one of our critical stakeholders, our employees, feel this way about this issue. And so having that top-down support added a lot of legitimacy, because as the community grew in size and sophistication, we had somewhere between 50 and 70 volunteers who were running community programming, local chapters, and all of that. And it gets hard for people to justify putting in hours and hours to do this volunteer work if they don't have some sort of official top-down support. So that executive sponsorship really helped. But we also organized bottom-up, and I'll let Holly talk about that, because when we talk about employee engagement, there's the top-down that you get from the people who can wave their magic wand and unlock resources, but then there's the good old-fashioned bottom-up community organizing.
Yeah, that was a really big part of it. So I think what made it really successful is understanding what employees wanted to do. We can't force them to do anything, and they have a lot of ideas. So what do they want? How can we support them? So the SCC kind of really started with this was 8 years ago. So sustainability wasn't quite as pervasive within the company. So trying to educate employees, they wanted to learn more. So we asked about, what kind of topics do you want to learn more about? Is it aqua farming or solar or electric vehicles or plant-based eating? What are the topics that matter to you? And then we brought speakers in to teach them about that. So that's kind of one of the first tenets of how it started. Then it kind of morphed into employees were like, okay, I get this, I get more of these topics, and now I want to do something. I want to start projects on my own. So we created some platforms for employee-led projects. So with some platforms online that employees could start their own projects, employees could join, and they could really make an impact. And then it morphed a third time into most of the focus on how they could bring sustainability into their roles. So that's kind of the North Star, is employees being able to, our motto was make sustainability part of everyone's job. Employees were then saying, how do I get a job in sustainability? We would say, well, you already have one. Let's see how we can bring sustainability into every part of the company, not just have it be siloed into one sustainability department. So we created a few different things, and employees were very involved in contributing to various things, like a role guide where anyone in the company can look up their role and have some employee feedback on how they could incorporate sustainability.
And I'd like to take that one level deeper with you, Holly. What strategies did you guys use to keep employees engaged over time?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the nuts and bolts of it, but we definitely use good old-fashioned surveys, just asking employees, how do you want to participate in this? What topics are you interested in? Even actually, it mattered a lot more than you might think of what forums we use, whether that's email or Teams. People would just leave the community if they got too many emails. So even just kind of nuts and bolts and things like that were important. And yeah, that was one.
My next question is for you, Van. As a current Microsoft employee, when did you decide to join the SCC, and why was it appealing?
I had really wanted to join it for a while, and I had this recurring meeting that kept stopping me from going. So finally, I just was like, "The hell with it! I'm just going to go to the meeting. I'm just going to go to SCC and skip this meeting." And then I went, and Holly was talking, and people were talking about things that were really encouraging and made me feel like, hey, there's hope out there, and there's really smart people doing smart things. And that just lit me up, and I was like, okay, I need to get involved. And so thank you, Holly, for that, and all the other great people, that have been part of that.
Now you're a father-son sustainability duo, huh?
And what would you say was the personal tipping point where you switched from being a passive member to an active volunteer?
I'd say it was really just going to the one meeting and just realizing that this was out there and this was possible. For me, I was one of the original people behind the Rock the Vote project in 91, 92 election. And I got really involved with that and grassroots organizing. And, we registered over 1 million people as part of that. And ever since then, I've always just wanted to be involved with something where I could make a difference. And this was, once again, just kind of sparked my fire.
Now to you, Nivi. You started your career as a consultant at Accenture. What was the catalyst for deciding to organize your colleagues to advocate for climate at the firm?
Okay, I want to know if anyone else has had this experience of working at a corporate job and being like, my life is actually so meaningless right now. Anyone else? Just me? Okay. seeing hands slowly go up. I wish I had a more eloquent answer than I was having an existential crisis and feeling meaningless. But I mean, maybe it wasn't so much a catalyst as it was just like daily paper cuts of the corporate machine. And so right now I run Soapbox and that's my job, but I never wanted to quit my job to work on climate. Like that was not in the cards for me. I liked getting paid my cushy 6-figure salary to move slides around in a PowerPoint deck. Like that was great. What I wanted to do is spend a few hours a week at this company that was very well resourced to do something in our community. And frankly, it wasn't specifically about climate in terms of how do we reduce carbon. You know, it was more so that I was living in San Francisco and I was seeing so many issues. The issues in San Francisco are like parts of Seattle are very visible. And so seeing like the side of the street that I was on having skyscrapers and $1,000 sneakers on feet, and then the other side of the street, people sleeping on the street and not having anywhere to go to the bathroom, you know? So that I think like there was all these factors that, and it was not that long after the 2016 election. And I was like, why am I spending my whole life making shapes? Like this doesn't make any sense. And so you asked catalyst. And so finally, I think when it was November 2018, California's most devastating wildfire broke out. It's called the Camp Fire, and the town where my partner's family, so now my family lives, that fire like started in their town. And so that for me was like, okay, I'm still working on some PowerPoint when people are dying 3 hours north of us in San Francisco. This is actually so unacceptable. And so I was just like some baby level entry, whatever the most junior associate. I forgot my actual role, but I had like no institutional power. So I spent the first 2 days after the fire broke out just like emailing. It's a huge company. There's 500,000 employees, 500,000 employees. And so I spent the first 2 days emailing everyone, emailing corporate citizenship, emailing the like people in charge of nonprofit giving, emailing the actual teams that had worked in Hurricane Harvey. And I was like, yo, we must have someone doing wildfire relief and like climate resilience when it comes to disasters, and who's doing that. And every email was like, oh, nice job, that's so kind of you to care, go donate to Red Cross. So nobody was doing it. So then I emailed all the Johns, like every West Coast leader. There were literally 3 guys named John. So I emailed all the John. This is not a meme. I actually emailed 3 guys named John in senior leadership with a proposal that was like, hey, this is what I want to do. I need 8 people. I need you to give me like $17,000. Please give it to me. And I'm going to go do this project and it's going to make you look good. And we're going to learn stuff for consulting. And I honestly didn't think anything was going to happen, but it was one of those might as well try moments. Like I just didn't feel like I could go to sleep without having done the most that I could. And then that night at like 9 p.m., one of the Johns called me and was like, hey, we're going to approve your project. And I was like, like my project that I submitted? He was like, yeah, we only have one condition. And I thought it was going to be some BS corporate whatever, but his one condition was, we just want you to call us every day and say that you're safe. I know. Go, John. So I think for me, that was one tipping point to be like, oh my gosh, I thought I had zero power, zero voice, zero everything. And so I think that was like maybe like the moment where it really clicked that every single person can do so much. I have like I don't have a degree in environmental science. Like I probably you all probably know way more about actually how like the climate is changing than I do. But I made a PowerPoint and I emailed the Johns. And then from that day onwards, I just realized like actually gathering people to do stuff is still hard, but it can be a lot easier than you think. So that's my story of the Johns.
Thank you for sharing that. That's very inspirational. Drew, over to you. As a consultant, you've been speaking about employee engagement to many different audiences. What trends are you seeing, and what advice have you been giving your clients?
We're at this really interesting moment, I think, with climate jobs. I mean, that term didn't even exist a couple of years ago, to be honest, or if it was, I wasn't aware of it deep inside the Microsoft bubble. But between COVID and the mass layoffs that have been happening, especially in tech in the last year, north of 300,000 people right now, I think there are many, many thousands of people who, like Nivi, and like many of you who raised your hands, are waking up every day going, what am I doing with my life? Am I just pushing PowerPoints around, or like, do I want to address this thing that is destroying my life, my family, my children's future, the planet? And how do I use the job and the skills that I have now, or what jobs and skills do I need to develop in order to make my job a climate job? And so there's this kind of what I'm seeing out there, and I've just spent the last year volunteering with Work on Climate. Anybody a member of the Work on Climate community in Slack? Okay, great. Biggest sustainability community out there, 30,000 people. There's a line of people around the block who are trying to break into climate work, which is wonderful. It's a very, very good problem to have. But it is still a problem because there will never be enough supply to satiate that demand. There will never be enough full-time dedicated climate jobs to satiate that. And so the trend that I'm seeing, and it kind of goes back to, I think, what Holly and I figured out inside Microsoft many years ago, is that you may not need to change jobs or change employers to get that climate job. The job you already have intersects with sustainability in some meaningful way. It may not be obvious, it may not be easy to figure out. You might be the first person to look at the intersection of whatever your job is with sustainability. But that is often the path of least resistance for people who want to break into climate work, is to take advantage of the job you already have, the employer you already have, and start something there. So that's kind of the trend I'm seeing, is that a lot of people want to break into this work, but they're thinking about it in a very old-fashioned traditional way, which is quit the job I currently have, acquire the one I don't, and do a bunch of stuff in between, which can work. Don't get me wrong. Like, there are many paths to the top of the mountain, but that is not the easiest one or the most accessible one for most of us. And here's the other thing of what we saw at Microsoft over and over again: you're full-time sustainability professionals, right? It is easy to romanticize what it's like to have a full-time sustainability job outside looking in. I have yet to meet a sustainability professional who would answer yes to the question, do you have enough resources to successfully do your job? I've never, if you're a sustainability professional and you're like, I'm adequately resourced, come find me and I would like to buy you a coffee. So it's easy to romanticize what it's like to get to work in these jobs all day, every day. But often the reality of what it's like to work in that job every day is actually kind of awful. You're chronically under-resourced. You don't have influence even inside your own company. And a lot of sustainability professionals burn out. And so I say this not to scare anybody away from becoming one of those sustainability professionals. I strongly encourage you to do that and change that work-life balance and that culture and that influence of what it is to be one. But to say that those people are heads down, trying to stay above water, looking at things like measuring and reducing carbon, measuring and reducing waste, water, all of that. What they're not doing, and what is the unique opportunity for everybody else, is I'm a software engineer. What's the unique way I can contribute to sustainability from software engineering? I'm a financial analyst, whatever. They're not looking at the millions and millions of other jobs that are out there and how they intersect with sustainability, and then reimagining how they can do it. So, at the risk of rambling, I guess how I'll sum it up is like, the advice I give a lot of my clients and what I'm seeing out there is we need to shift the perspective away from how do I get a climate job, which is very me-centric, and then reframe it to ask the question, how do I create as many climate jobs and opportunities for as many other people as possible? Because at the end of the day, this is about systems change. It's not about any one or two people making a career transition. It's about literally reimagining how the global economy functions and changing power structures. And so that's going to take a lot of work and a lot of ingenuity and creativity.
Thank you for sharing. Van, back to you. Recently, Microsoft employees have been asking the company to leave the U.S. Chamber of Commerce over its climate obstruction. Can you share more about the Escape the Chamber campaign and the tactics you have been using to educate and activate your own colleagues?
Yeah, sure. So that's how Drew and I met. Last August, we kicked off the campaign, And it was pretty eye-opening to me. I didn't realize how awful and powerful the U.S. Chamber of Commerce really is. And if you don't believe me, you should look at what Sheldon Whitehouse has to say about it, and the Bill McKibben video that ClimateVoice produced. And so Drew introduced me to the ClimateVoice, and I volunteered along with my amazing partner, Yulia Broyhill, who's unfortunately not here today. But originally, we helped launch a website that ClimateVoice built to kind of give people the basics about, hey, here's the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and all the things they've done to stop positive climate policy and sue states from transparency laws like the California law on emissions. And if you looked at all of these things, they were all mostly things that Microsoft was for, that the that the chamber voted against and sued against. And we started by working with Holly at the time, and she gave us a forum to speak in the monthly meeting, and then we started promoting via a lot of the channels, so Teams and some of our messaging channels. Additionally, we hosted a couple of live sessions with ClimateVoice, which were really successful because it gave people kind of a much deeper chance to have like 45 minutes to ask questions and really get to know what was going on. We've hosted a couple of virtual events now where we actually signed up some more volunteers, which is great. I think the biggest thing in all of it was, early on, I was like, okay, we need to leave the chamber and we need to do this right away. And getting feedback from employees who are like, well, wait a minute, we're on the board, why can't we change things? And wait a minute, I'm a employee that doesn't live in the United States, why should I care? And I think there was that moment where it was really important to kind of hear what the community was saying and then come up with the right responses. And in this case, it was, well, even as Microsoft has publicly come out and supported these bills, the chamber just went and did a lawsuit last week. So they don't care about what Microsoft does, and the chamber is run by all the fossil fuel companies. And and then the second part of that is, because the U.S. Chamber has so much, it's the largest lobbying group in the world, essentially, so much power, it does affect the rest of the world, and we are trying to get people from other parts of the world to sign our petition, and we've actually got a couple of foreign volunteers now, and we're going to start taking their stories and tell about why they're motivated to be behind this and kind of keep that going.
Wait, can I add on something to that? So Van and Yulia and several other Microsoft employees ran this campaign inside the company, and after 5 months, the company actually responded with a first of its kind trade association policy audit report for sustainability. So it's not like that they were just shouting into the void. This concentrated campaign, calls, newsletters, petitions, tightening the screws, as we like to say in this space, worked on some level, right? Now Microsoft has created transparency and said, these are the 10 trade associations that we're a member of in the United States. These are our top climate policy positions, and they created a scorecard that essentially says, this one is in alignment with us, this one is not. Unsurprisingly, the chamber was the least aligned. That transparency is a critical first step, but the most important part of that is like I wish we could hold up the ClimateVoice t-shirt. Jen, can you hold up the ClimateVoice t-shirt? Let's show everybody the logo. Oh yeah, it's behind me. Oh yeah. When employees speak, companies act. It's true. It really, really is true. And so you don't get everything that you want in the first pass. That's rarely how it works. Anyone who's organized knows that. Anyone who's run activism knows that. But when you speak up, it works.
Thank you for adding that, Drew. Drew, you were one of the early signatories of the lead statement and stood on stage with Bill Weil when he launched that at GreenBiz 24. Why did you sign your name, and why is it important for sustainability professionals to speak up for climate policy together?
Can you explain what LEAD is to everybody, just so there's context?
Yes, so the lead statement was launched at the GreenBiz conference back in February and asks sustainability professionals to elevate climate policy in their own jobs.
yeah, so I stood up on stage with Bill and Catherine and several others who are here today, and was a part of that. It's really important when you think about corporate sustainability. Policy advocacy, trade associations, lobbying is not always the first thing that comes to mind. And yet, as Bill has so persistently and defiantly pointed out for many years, this is one of the single most important things that companies can do when it comes to climate change. Measuring and reducing your carbon emissions, your water, your waste, wonderful. Yes, please, and more. But private corporations are not going to save us from the climate crisis. Full stop. They actually are incentivized in many ways to exacerbate it because, as Nivi pointed out, we live in an extractive economy. But governments make the rules and the policies. And so policymakers and lawmakers are the ones who should be dictating this. And individual voters like us don't actually have that much power and say over how that works. But these massive lobbying associations and trade associations like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, you better believe they have a lot of influence. And so I signed the lead statement because, number one, I want to bring more awareness to the importance of policy and trade associations into corporate sustainability work. But number two, because I have had so many conversations with colleagues and sustainability professionals and practitioners who will say one thing to me in private in confidence about how they really feel, but feel sort of hamstrung or silenced in their day-to-day job. You don't want to bite the hand that feeds. You don't want to criticize your employer. You just want to show up and do good work every day. But we're getting to a stage of the climate crisis now where nobody can really afford to be quiet anymore. Nobody can really afford to be silent. And if we can have a groundswell of sustainability professionals in particular standing up to their companies and saying, what you're doing is amazing, I'm literally doing it, but we also want you to align your policy advocacy and your trade association memberships with your own sustainability goals. I just think that would really push the companies in a way that a garden variety employee like any of us probably wouldn't. These sustainability professionals have power and have influence, but only if they organize and speak up.
Nivi, in your experience, what inspires employees to take action in the workplace, and what do you consider the biggest challenges?
I would love to add something. Oh, I'll make mine quick, Holly. So I thought this might be too spicy, but you're segueing in, and I just wanted to say that I think that in the climate movement, there appears to be this very narrow definition of what climate work is. And that really surprises me because I think we should all get on the understanding that climate change is a threat multiplier of everything. And so if you're in your job, fighting for fair parental leave, like that to me is just as important or probably more important of you quitting your job and like taking a class and then doing a career transition. So I think one thing that I would really like to encourage based on what Drew was saying is there are so many opportunities at your actual job and the harmful system, because like climate change is a symptom of the extractive economy that we're in, right? And so like I think there are so many inroads that people aren't really seeing because they're not obvious and we're taught to have a very narrow focus. But I think especially if you work for a larger company, there are so many things that you can do that might not seem like climate action, we're reducing carbon right now, but they go such a long way in creating time and space and energy and resources for all of us to be able to breathe and then to be able to do this work. So I think that's just a really important thing to remind each other of.
And for those of you wondering, Climate Voice does have an employee action guide outlining action steps that you can take at work. So I encourage you to check that out as well. Holly, Grist recently published a piece about how employees tried to stop Microsoft from helping fossil fuel companies accelerate extraction to maximize profits. What did that campaign achieve, and where did that effort fall short?
Yeah, and I'll add one quick thing too that kind of answers your question you asked earlier and adds on to Drew's, that a key factor too is making sure as much as you can that each of those business groups, like you mentioned, software, finance, has ways that employees get recognized for that work. It needs to have, one of the things we pushed for really hard at Microsoft was having the OKRs, objectives and key results, for each of those business groups, so that employees actually get recognized, they get promoted for that work. It doesn't feel like their bosses don't feel like their employee is wasting their time on some passion project that's not contributing to the role, and then they get really penalized in their careers. And what we were trying to do at Microsoft too, and I hope that folks there will continue to take it forward, I think folks are, is having that be part of the official way that employees are evaluated. I mean, put it in your yearly evaluations or bi-yearly evaluations. Just like at Microsoft, they added diversity and inclusion. Every employee has to say how they're contributing to diversity and inclusion. Let's get sustainability in there too.
Van, as Drew referenced before, Microsoft's leadership responded to employee concerns by releasing a trade association audit, which found that the U.S. Chamber is out of step with Microsoft's own climate policy positions. Why was that an important win, and what do you want the company to do next?
Well, it's an important win because the first step of any problem is acknowledging there's a problem, right? So they acknowledge the problem and it's out there. Now they need to take some action. And, I think, I'm really proud to work for Microsoft, and I have a different history than Drew and Holly do. And they're obviously have been a lot deeper into this than I have. And I relish the fact that the company's trying to do some things right, but I think this is a super important step to leave, because not only have they acknowledged that there's an issue, it's also been very clear, like I said, that as soon as Microsoft came out in support of some of the transparency rules, the chamber went ahead and sued the state of California. Now, this is where I think the company has a great opportunity to lead, because there's a lot of other companies within the chamber that I think are looking at us to see, what are you guys going to do? You're the biggest company out there, and if you do something, then we're going to follow. And there's also other companies like Nike and Unilever and Apple that have already left the chamber. So I think there's a great opportunity for the company to build a coalition and do something really positive, and that's what I'd like to see them do.
All right, now I have a final question for all of you. What is your advice to people who want to influence their companies to do more on climate?
Yeah, I can go first. Speak up and organize with your colleagues. Also do a little bit of homework. See what your company is already doing. Oftentimes they are doing something, but for various reasons, they're not talking about it. This is something called green hushing that happens a lot. There's a lot of pushback. And so do your homework first. Figure out what your company is and isn't doing when it comes to all things climate. See if there is an existing employee community that you can plug into. This is something I see happen all the time, is people get really fired up and really excited, and we love it, please more, but they go off and create a sustainability community or an initiative that's duplicative of something that's already happened. So slow down a little bit, do your homework, do a landscape analysis, see what already exists, see what's already been done. You also get the benefit, if you do that, especially if you connect with former organizers or your predecessors, to learn what didn't work and why, so that you don't make those same mistakes. So yeah, take a look around, see what's going on, and then find that first low-hanging fruit campaign or that first thing that you're pretty sure your company will say yes to. And for Holly and I, and hilariously, many of the people I've talked to over the years, waste is the gateway drug. The very first thing that we worked on as Just Two was trying to convince Microsoft to stop making so much trash in their cafeterias and cafes. And that's pretty easy, all things considered. It's not carbon sequestration. So start with something that you feel like the company won't resist and will probably be an easy win and an easy way for you to build power and good rapport with your colleagues and with the leadership of the company.
I would also say it's important to be productive and not just disruptive. So I think it's all about how you handle the message and being respectful when you go there. I know that there's been some people who have done things like sit-ins and stuff like that and lost their jobs. And that's not productive for anybody, because you're making yourself, you're risking your own ability, your own livelihood. You're risking the ability to make any change if you're no longer part of the game. And I think starting with, hey, I'm interested in this. I respect your opinion. Can you help me enable this? Is a way to start. I think, like Nivi was saying, being brave and having that conversation is important. I also think believing that you can do this and surrounding yourself with other people that can help you hone your message and get there is important.
Okay, I have. I'm trying to think of where to start on this question.
Bucket hats.
Bucket hats, definitely. So there's this excellent book by the Heath brothers called Switch, and it's about how change happens. And I thought that was a very good articulation of some of the things I had seen at Accenture, worked on, and then also in my schemes of like how do I make my corporate life more purposeful. I probably talked to over 200 people just nosying around happy hours and being like, do you like your job or is your life meaningless? And so many themes emerged, and so they mapped to two things that I want to share with you from this book, which you might have already read it. But one of them is basically they say that the way that change happens is see, feel, change. Whereas the way that a lot of people do change efforts is like, here are the facts, and this is why you should do it, and shame on you. That is very rare to actually work. So in this book, they basically say that one of the first steps that you can take is to highlight the bright spots. And I think that's something like that, like even right now on the stage, sharing the stories of what have worked. And when you are talking about how Microsoft increased their transparency, I think those stories are really important in inspiring people, because part of the reason, I believe that part of the reason it will take us a long time to get out of this climate crisis, whatever that exactly means, I don't know, is a lot of people feel like they can't do anything. So our self efficacy, which is basically a fancy term for saying our ability to believe that we can make change, is not very good right now. And if we don't have self ethic, like if we don't believe we can change stuff, then we're not going to change stuff. So I think the first piece for inspiring employees at your workplace, no matter if you work with one other person or 500,000 other people, is highlight the bright spots. So, one thing that was kind of a stroke of luck, I mean, who knows, stroke of luck, persistence, all of those things, is this the disaster relief effort I was mentioning. It was such a big splashy thing. Okay, the CEO of the entire 500,000 company had me do a video for the entire company, and like obviously I love my 15 minutes of fame, but what I realized after that is people weren't just like, oh, Nivi, you're so cool. Of course they thought it was cool, but they also had that gave people inspiration to do their own projects, because here's an example that me, a random person, did something really extraordinary. So I think the first thing, and like a very easy thing, is to find examples of change within your own company. It doesn't have to be on climate. It can be like, hey, 5 years ago, we made a policy for having breakfast burritos every day. So why can't we have a policy to switch our bank? I know that's a little ridiculous, but I can't think of a better analogy right now. So I think that's the first thing. And then the second thing, which I know Drew talks about a lot and it's all over the internet, is like being very clear on what the actions are that people can take, because people need guidance. And I know that like a lot of organizers want to be chill and want to let people do their own thing. Don't let people do their own thing, right? If the ask is to sign a petition to leave the chamber, that is so much easier for me, an employee, to be like, sure, I can take 30 seconds to do this, versus like, hey, let's plan a climate action. So that was another thing that I've really seen is like, maybe that's not so much like inspiring change, but I actually do think that's part of it. And in this book, they call it like script the moves. And so, really being as clear as possible on what the steps are. What are you asking people to do? Why are you asking them to do it? So, those are some things on the inspiration level. And I actually think the greatest challenge, other than the fact that the corporate lobbying complex is a behemoth, is I think it's lack of courage. I think that we don't collectively realize that courage is a skill and we can practice it. And the more you practice it, the easier it gets. At Soapbox, we run cohort based courses on different themes that our community wants to learn about. And one of them is, how do you take action at work? And week 4, something out of the 6 weeks, the prompt, the like homework or whatever discussion thing is practice having conversations. And so it's like a role play thing where one person is themselves and then the other person is their manager or someone else at the company. And so people will role play that climate conversation, and then their actual homework will be, okay, now go to work and then do the thing that you just practiced. And almost every single time someone has actually, I think every single time someone has done this, the response has either been neutral, but more often than not, the response is overwhelmingly positive. So people are not having these climate conversations at work because a lot of people are scared. Like you said, people don't want to bite the hand that feeds them, right? But we are all humans living on a burning planet and we all want to do something about it. And that includes your manager and probably includes your manager's manager. So I think that the biggest challenge is people are not finding ways to tap into courage. And there's really not that many resources that's like, how can I be more courageous? So yeah, that's part of what we do at Soapbox. And the reason that like ClimateVoice I think is so effective is because there are tools and there are examples and the moves are scripted, and there is just this underlying value in both of our organizations that courage is a really big piece of the equation, and that is what's going to shrink the size of the challenge.
Wow, they all nailed it. I have like basically nothing else to add except maybe hugs. Making sure that you have people in this that you can trust. I mean, it was so incredible. I've gotten to work with several of these folks really deeply over time, and just having folks you can trust, vent to, collaborate with, get a hug when you need it, has just been crucial. That's all.
That's the part I didn't expect when I started doing this at least at Microsoft. I came from the nonprofit world and saw that Microsoft had a ton of resources. It was like, wow, how do we get our hands on those for climate? But what I didn't expect was to make lifelong friends and people who are like my ride or dies, like my emergency contacts. And so starting to do this work, you also might have the benefit of meeting some of the best people that you've ever met in your life and like lifelong homies. So if nothing else, do it for that.
Well, that's all we have time for today. Just a few closing remarks. Thank you for coming to this session today. Thank you to our panelists for their insights as well. Thank you to KEXP and Bloomberg Green for hosting us today. We have shirts available at the exit over there. Please sign our Escape the Chamber campaign, escapethechamber.org. We also have a QR code you can scan, sign the petition, follow us on LinkedIn, ClimateVoice.org, and thank you all for coming.